Homosexuality is itself a form of narcissism, and as such, homosexuality cannot exist in the absence of narcissism. I have discussed the fact that homosexuality is itself a form of narcissism in other videos. The narcissistic pathology of the parents made it impossible for them to hold their children empathically and to help them progress from one developmental phase to another. Another cause of lesbianism is a girl growing up in a misogynistic family system. This prevents a girl from forming a healthy female gender identity because she is given the message that men and masculinity are superior and women and femininity are inferior. Psychoanalyst Dr. Gerald Schonewolf explains that these negative attitudes about femininity are introjected from parents. For example, if mothers harbor feelings of resentment about their femininity, these attitudes are passed along to their daughters through verbal and nonverbal messages, such as devaluing the daughter's looks, bemoaning femininity and the feminine role, or favoring a son over the daughter. The daughters then unconsciously devalue their own femininity. In many cases, siblings figure into the equation. An older or younger brother is favored by one or the other parent. He, of course, has an organ that the girl does not have, and he is given favored treatment. If he is older and he is competitive and rejecting of her, she will grow up hating him and displacing that hatred on men in general. If he is younger, she feels resentful that he has taken her mother's attention away, and concludes that it is because he is male and has an organ she does not have. Another former lesbian said that in her family, females were nothing, males everything. It is important to note that for the majority of human history, lesbianism has been caused by the reasons I have just explained. However, in modern times, it is more and more frequently being caused by the following: porn-induced sexual addictions and fetishes, caused by exposure to lesbian pornography, being psychologically and sexually groomed and confused by the LGBT propaganda in schools and media. Students of all grade levels are being encouraged by public school educators to try on various sexual identities. Some school homosexual affirming programs even encourage students to experiment with same-sex relationships or to consider bisexuality as an option. Other causes of lesbianism include the total lack of truth and reality-based moral and sexual standards in society. Just being dysgenic and physically unattractive. I personally have never in my life seen a beautiful woman who is a lesbian. In one study, young girls with gender identity disorders were rated for physical attractiveness. Not surprisingly, the girls with gender identity disorders were rated as significantly less attractive, beautiful, cute, and pretty than girls without gender identity disorders. Another cause of lesbianism is just being dysgenic, stupid, and low IQ. The low IQ and weak-minded are easily manipulated by social engineering. Dr. Siegel said of her lesbian patients that their poor impulse control led to many actions that denied the physical reality of two separate sexes. Another cause of lesbianism is just becoming severely mentally ill at an older age. In rare cases, people can have a relatively normal early childhood, but then, for a wide variety of reasons, can become severely mentally and/or sexually ill during puberty, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and sometimes even late adulthood. Another cause of lesbianism is hormonal dysfunction. In modern times, this is largely thanks to the fact that our environment is being intentionally poisoned with hormone-disrupting chemicals in order to create a population of androgynous, retarded, confused, and sexually perverted LGBT slaves. Another cause of lesbianism is general disappointment in men because of failed relationships with unmasculine men who make women lose faith in love, or men who are selfish lovers who do not know or care how to pleasure the female body and mind. Some women seem to develop normally as girls and in fact function well heterosexually and marry, but then, to the complete surprise of their entire family, fall into a lesbian relationship in adulthood. The emotionally fragile woman with unfulfilled nurturance needs may turn to a lesbian relationship out of disappointment and loneliness, or after she has become disillusioned by a bad marriage or divorce. And another cause of lesbianism, which is becoming more and more common in today's dysfunctional world, is a girl growing up seeing the example of an unloving and dysfunctional heterosexual marriage or relationship. If the biological parents don't show their children how to love the opposite gender, the children will have great difficulty internalizing an understanding of what healthy heterosexuality looks like. Another ex-lesbian, who is now married to a man, describes patterns of family dysfunction and woundedness in the lives of many women who have dealt with same-sex feelings. Childhood trauma, poor self-image, anger at men, poor relationships with either or both parents, and pro-homosexual media propaganda are several key elements in women developing an attraction to other women. Basically, it is impossible to become LGBT without severe psychological disturbance, and this disturbance is most often a result of trauma in childhood. Compared with heterosexuals, LGBT individuals report more childhood psychological and physical abuse by parents or caretakers, more childhood sexual abuse, more partner psychological and physical victimization in adulthood, and more sexual assault experiences in adulthood. Our recent study found that 83% of LGBTQ individuals report going through adverse childhood experiences such as sexual and emotional abuse and have worse mental health as adults when compared to their heterosexual peers. Of course, the study authors failed to figure out that this sky-high rate of childhood trauma is literally the reason they became LGBTQ in the first place. And of the 17% of LGBTQ people who do not report childhood trauma, it is because their trauma either occurred between the ages of conception and age 3, which is too early for much conscious memory, and or because the trauma they experienced was covert trauma as opposed to overt trauma. Covert trauma causes a person to disconnect or dissociate from their true selves and their bodies. And the physical body is the physical expression of the true self. Dissociation from the true heterosexual self and the heterosexually designed body is the foundation of all forms of homosexuality and all forms of transgenderism. Covert trauma is often far more harmful than overt trauma because it is usually not even registered as trauma by the person who has been traumatized. As a result, they end up internalizing the trauma instead of recognizing it as separate from their true selves. For example, having a father who is emotionally distant and withholding of affection is typically not even consciously recognized as trauma. However, this type of father causes profound developmental harm to his children, and in fact, nearly all, if not all, homosexual men have this type of father. These homosexual men will often claim they didn't experience childhood trauma and therefore were not traumatized into becoming homosexual because they were not sexually abused. However, a child not having a close emotional and physical relationship with their father is a severe form of covert trauma. Likewise, many lesbians had mothers who themselves were disconnected from their own femininity because of mental health issues or their own trauma, and as a result, never transmitted femininity to their daughters. This again is a form of severe covert trauma that is often not even consciously recognized as trauma. These are the lesbians who, just like many homosexual men, claim they were not traumatized into becoming homosexual because they were not sexually abused, failing to recognize that having a mother disconnected from the feminine is itself a severe form of covert trauma. If someone is LGBT, there is nearly a 100% chance that they experienced gender trauma at some point in their childhood. Unfortunately, as dysfunctional, narcissistic parents keep raising more and more narcissistic and gender-confused children, the LGBT population will continue to increase. As medical doctor and LGBT expert Dr. Lorraine Day explains, society, in its rush to be tolerant and driven by a media with an agenda to promote homosexuality, is destroying itself. It is encouraging and embracing the raising of a multitude of dysfunctional children into dysfunctional adults, while categorizing this aberrant lifestyle as normal. So now that I've gone over the causes of lesbianism, I hope you now have a clear understanding of the types of gender wounds and gender traumas that can cause a woman to become non-heterosexual. As with all things, there may exist rare exceptions. However, rare exceptions do not negate the general rules. So, now that you know the most common causes of lesbianism, if you have daughters or plan to have daughters one day, please make sure to avoid inflicting upon their female psyches the types of gender traumas that cause lesbianism and female-to-male transgenderism, which is a more extreme form of the female gender identity disorder that causes lesbianism. Femininity, like masculinity, is something spiritual and sacred. Femininity must be cherished and protected by society, religion, culture, men, and women in order for it to properly bloom in females. Little girls internalize a positive feminine gender identity when they observe positive examples of femininity, especially in their own mothers. And genuine, authentic femininity simply cannot exist in lesbians, because lesbianism itself is literally an expression of the wounded feminine and wounded femininity. Well, that is all for this video. If you found this video informative, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video on social media and with your friends and family. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you all in the next video. Bye for now.